There is a moment in every conversation where you feel it happening. The shift. Someone questions your decision, your motive, your choice, and suddenly you're scrambling. Words pour out of you like water through cracked hands. You explain, you justify, you defend. And with every sentence, you feel yourself shrinking. Machiavelli understood something that most of us spend our entire lives running from. The moment you begin to explain yourself, you hand over your power. Not gradually, immediately, but here we are, living in an age where silence is treated like guilt, where withholding explanation feels like withholding love. So what happens to the person who refuses to play this game? What becomes of the one who chooses the weight of silence over the relief of confession? We live in a civilization built on performance. Every platform, every screen, every conversation has become a stage where we audition for approval. We explain our careers to relatives who never asked. We justify our boundaries to people who wouldn't respect them anyway. We narrate our lives in real time, as if our existence needs a running commentary to be valid. The modern world has convinced us that transparency equals honesty, that oversharing equals intimacy, that constant explanation equals connection. But underneath all that noise, there's a quiet erosion happening. We're not building relationships. We're building defenses. And every time we explain ourselves without being asked, we're admitting something we don't want to face. We're admitting that we believe our choices need permission. That's where our story begins. Not in a palace or a battlefield, but in the silent war between noise and power. Between the version of you that seeks validation and the version that doesn't need it. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, not as a guide to cruelty, but as a mirror held up to human nature. He saw what most people refuse to see. That respect isn't earned through confession. It's commanded through composure. That influence doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being undeniable. His words were written for rulers, but the truth inside them applies to anyone who has ever felt their power slip away in the middle of a sentence they didn't need to say. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. He saw what comfort hides. That people respect control, not confession. That mystery holds more weight than explanation. That the leader who justifies every move is the leader who invites rebellion. But this isn't just about leadership in the traditional sense. It's about the leadership of your own life. The quiet authority you either claim or surrender every single day. And most of us, without realizing it, are surrendering. Let's go deeper. Why do we do this? Why do we over-explain, over-justify, over-apologize for decisions that were ours to make in the first place? The answer sits in a place most of us avoid. The shadow. Carl Jung called it the part of ourselves we repress, deny, or project onto others. It's the voice that says you're not enough. The voice that whispers you need permission to exist. Every time you launch into an explanation nobody asked for, it's not your wisdom speaking. It's your shadow. It's the wounded part of you still seeking approval from a world that was never going to give it freely. Think about the last time you justified a boundary. A simple no that spiraled into a paragraph. You weren't protecting the relationship. You were protecting yourself from the discomfort of being misunderstood. You were avoiding the possibility that someone might think less of you. But here's the trap. The more you explain, the more you invite interrogation. The more you justify, the more you signal that your position is negotiable. You think you're building trust, but you're actually building doubt. In yourself, in them. Explanation, when unsolicited, is the language of insecurity. I watched someone recently explain why they couldn't attend a social event. The explanation lasted 3 minutes. It included logistics, emotions, past obligations, future plans. And the person listening? They stopped caring after the first sentence. Not because they were rude, but because the explanation made the absence feel like a problem that needed solving. A simple, "I can't make it," would have been enough. But that requires something most of us are terrified of. It requires standing in your decision without scaffolding. It requires trusting that your choice is valid simply because you made it. The emotional cost of this pattern is staggering. Exhaustion, resentment, a creeping sense that you're always defending a case that was never on trial. You become a ghost in your own life, narrating your existence for an audience that isn't even paying attention. And here's what nobody tells you. The people who respect you least are often the ones you explain yourself to the most. Because respect doesn't come from understanding. It comes from presence, from the quiet certainty that doesn't need words to justify itself. There's a hidden mechanism at work here, and it's older than any of us. Society rewards conformity and punishes silence. The person who doesn't explain is seen as cold, secretive, arrogant. We've been trained to believe that withholding explanation is withholding care. But that's a lie designed to keep you compliant. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He called it herd mentality. The instinct to blend in, to avoid standing out, to make yourself digestible for people who were never going to swallow your truth anyway. Jung called it the persona, the mask you wear to survive social interaction. But the more you explain, the heavier that mask becomes. Until one day, you can't remember what your face looked like without it. Power begins when you stop explaining. Not because you're hiding, but because you've realized that your life doesn't need a defense. It needs a witness, and that witness is you. Let's return to Machiavelli. In The Prince, he wrote something that still unnerves people 5 centuries later. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. Read that again. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This is the law. Appearance holds more power than reality. Perception governs action, and the person who controls perception doesn't do it through explanation. They do it through restraint. Machiavelli understood that leadership, true leadership, isn't about being liked. It's about being effective, and effectiveness requires a kind of ruthless editing. You don't broadcast your doubts. You don't justify your strategies. You don't apologize for decisions that were necessary. You act, and you let the results speak. Because here's the truth most people never accept. Explanation dilutes authority. The moment you start defending your choices, you invite others to question them. You turn your decision into a debate. And debates are won by whoever argues longest, not by whoever is right. Think about the leaders you actually respect. Not the ones you like. The ones you respect. They don't explain themselves constantly. They don't post essays defending their choices. They move with a kind of calm certainty that makes explanation unnecessary. This isn't arrogance. It's economy of energy. They've learned what Machiavelli knew. That words, when overused, become noise. That silence, when wielded correctly, becomes presence. That the leader who talks the most is often the leader who trusts themselves the least. History is full of examples. Caesar didn't explain his crossing of the Rubicon. He crossed it and let Rome catch up. Marcus Aurelius didn't justify his Stoic philosophy to the Senate. He lived it and let the empire watch. Elizabeth I of England understood this deeply. When pressured to marry, to explain her choices, to justify her rule, she responded with strategic silence. She gave them riddles instead of reasons. And in doing so, she maintained her power for over 4 decades. Because mystery, not transparency, is the true currency of influence. But here's where it gets morally complex. Isn't silence just manipulation? Isn't withholding explanation a form of control? Yes, and no. There's a difference between strategic restraint and dishonesty. There's a difference between choosing not to justify yourself and actively deceiving someone. Machiavelli has been misread for centuries as an advocate for cruelty, but his real message was about efficiency, about not wasting your power on people who wouldn't honor it anyway, about understanding that some battles aren't worth fighting, and some explanations aren't worth giving. The question isn't whether silence can be used as a weapon. Of course it can. The question is whether your silence serves your integrity or betrays it. Are you withholding explanation because you're hiding something shameful? Or are you withholding it because you've learned that not every question deserves an answer? Are you being silent out of fear? Or out of sovereignty? That distinction matters, and it's one only you can make. Machiavelli's law isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. Conscious of where your energy goes. Conscious of who you're performing for. Conscious of the difference between connection and compulsion. Because here's what happens when you stop explaining yourself. You stop leaking power. You stop giving people access to your inner world who haven't earned it. You stop treating your decisions like they're up for vote. And slowly, quietly, you reclaim the authority over your own life. So where does this leave you? Right now, in your life, with your relationships, with your work, with the decisions you make every single day. If you're honest, you probably recognize yourself in some of this. The over-explaining, the justifications, the creeping sense that you're always one explanation away from being accepted. And maybe you've told yourself it's kindness. Maybe you've convinced yourself that explaining is how you show care. But what if it's not? What if it's fear dressed up as generosity? Jung believed that transformation begins when you stop running from your shadow. When you stop pretending you don't care what people think. When you stop denying the parts of yourself that crave approval, that fear rejection, that would rather exhaust yourself explaining than risk being misunderstood. Because the shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It just controls you from the background. Every time you explain yourself when you didn't need to, that's the shadow speaking. That's the part of you that still believes your existence needs a footnote. But here's where the alchemy happens. When you integrate the shadow, when you face it directly, something shifts. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop justifying choices that were yours to make. You stop bleeding energy into explanations that fall on ears that weren't listening anyway. And in that space, something new emerges. Not coldness, not cruelty, but clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't need words to prove itself. The kind of presence that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Nietzsche understood this as the will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The ability to stand in your choices without scaffolding. To move through the world with the kind of quiet authority that doesn't ask for permission. He called it self-overcoming. The process of becoming who you are by shedding who you were told to be. And that process always begins with silence. Not the silence of suppression. The silence of sovereignty. Every time you explain, a part of your fire dims. Not because explanation is inherently wrong, but because unsolicited explanation is a confession. It's an admission that you don't trust your own judgment. That you need external validation to feel solid in your choices. And the world, consciously or not, senses that. It senses when you're standing on solid ground and when you're standing on apology. And it responds accordingly. The transformation isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming someone you've always been underneath the performance. Underneath the need to be understood by people who are never going to understand you anyway. It's about recognizing that your life is not a court case. Your decisions are not on trial. And the only verdict that matters is the one you deliver to yourself. You stop explaining not because you're cold, but because you've learned that silence is the language of the strong. Because you've realized that the people who matter will trust you without a script. And the people who don't? They were never going to believe you anyway. No amount of explanation would have been enough. So why give it? This is the rebirth. The moment when you step out of the cycle of justification and into presence. When you stop narrating your life and start living it. When you realize that power isn't something you argue for. It's something you embody. And embodiment doesn't require explanation. It requires action. Aligned action. The kind that speaks for itself. Think about the last time you made a decision that felt right in your gut but looked wrong to everyone else. Maybe you left a job. Maybe you ended a relationship. Maybe you chose a path that didn't make sense on paper. And the questions came. They always do. Why? Are you sure? What about this? Have you thought about that? And maybe you answered them. Maybe you spent hours, days, weeks explaining your reasons. Defending your choice like it was a dissertation. But here's what I want you to consider. What if you hadn't? What if you had smiled, nodded, and said, "I've made my choice"? What if you had let your actions be your explanation? The people who love you, truly love you, would have trusted you. They might not have understood, but they would have trusted. And the people who didn't? They were looking for cracks in your conviction. They were waiting for doubt to seep in so they could feel better about their own inaction. Your explanation wasn't going to change their mind. It was only going to exhaust yours. Machiavelli's wisdom was never about cruelty. It was about conserving energy. About recognizing that your life force is finite and precious. That every word you speak carries weight. And when you spend that weight on justification, you're spending it on something that doesn't multiply. You're investing in a currency that doesn't compound. But when you conserve it, when you speak only when your words add value, when you let silence carry your truth, that's when you become magnetic. Not because you're mysterious for the sake of it, but because you're solid. Because people can feel the difference between someone who's trying to convince them and someone who's already convinced themselves. There's a line from Nietzsche that echoes here. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Owning yourself, that's what this is about. Not manipulation, not games. Ownership. The quiet, unshakable ownership of your choices, your path, your life. And ownership doesn't explain itself. It doesn't need to. So let's bring this home. Let's make it practical. Because philosophy without application is just theory. And theory doesn't change your life. Action does. Here's the shift. The next time someone questions your decision, pause before you respond. Feel the urge to explain rising up. Notice it. Don't judge it. Just notice it. Then ask yourself, did they ask for an explanation, or am I offering one out of fear? If they asked, and the relationship warrants it, give them the truth. Clean, concise, without apology. But if they didn't ask? If the question was a probe, a test, a way to fill awkward silence? Let the silence sit. Smile if you want. Nod. But don't fill the gap with words you'll regret. Let your stillness be your answer. This isn't about being cold. It's about being intentional. It's about recognizing that not every question is an invitation. Some are traps. Some are projections. Some are just noise. And your energy, your precious life force, is too valuable to spend on noise. Save your words for the people who've earned them. For the relationships where explanation deepens connection instead of defending it. And for everyone else, let your actions speak. Let your results speak. Let your life speak. Here's the core law, distilled into one sentence. The less you explain, the more you embody. The more you embody, the less you need to explain. It's a loop, a cycle, and the entry point is always the same. It's the moment you decide that your life doesn't need a defense. It just needs a direction. and you're the only one who gets to set it. Machiavelli wrote The Prince for rulers, but the truth inside it belongs to anyone who's ever felt their power slip away mid-sentence. To anyone who's ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller than when they entered. To anyone who's tired of living like their choices are up for public vote. You are not on trial. Your life is not a case that needs arguing. And the moment you stop acting like it is, everything changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but deeply, permanently. The world will always demand explanations. People will always ask why. They'll push, they'll probe, they'll question your motives, your timing, your choices. And here's the freedom: you don't owe them anything. Not cruelty, but not confession either. You owe yourself clarity. You owe yourself the dignity of standing in your decisions without scaffolding. You owe yourself the kind of life where your yes means yes and your no means no, and neither one requires a paragraph. Power doesn't explain, it simply is. And when you stop explaining, when you start embodying, you'll feel it. That shift, that reclamation, that quiet, unshakable knowing that you don't need permission to exist. You just need presence. And presence, real presence, doesn't talk. It commands attention without saying a word. So here we are, at the end of this exploration and the beginning of something else. A choice, a fork in the path. You can keep living the way you've been living. Explaining, justifying, defending, pouring your energy into people who weren't asking and wouldn't have listened anyway. Or you can try something different, something harder, something that feels uncomfortable at first but becomes freedom later. You can stop explaining your boundaries, stop justifying your no, stop defending your yes, stop narrating your life like it's a performance that needs applause. Just stop, and in that stopping, in that deliberate, conscious restraint, you'll discover something most people never find. Your own authority, not borrowed, not performed, just yours. This isn't a call to become distant. It's not a call to build walls or cut people off or live in isolation. It's a call to discernment, to recognizing that connection doesn't require confession. That intimacy doesn't mean transparency with everyone. That some people deserve your inner world, and most don't. And that's not cruelty. That's wisdom. That's the wisdom Machiavelli tried to teach 500 years ago. The wisdom that gets lost in a culture that treats oversharing as honesty and silence as sin. Think about the people you admire most. The ones who move through life with a kind of calm authority. They're not the loudest. They're not the ones posting essays about every decision. They're not the ones defending themselves in every conversation. They're quiet, intentional, present, and when they speak, it matters. Because they've learned what you're learning now. That words are currency. That explanation is expenditure. And that the wisest investment is often silence. If you're drawn to ideas like this, if something in this resonates, then you're already on the path. You're already questioning the patterns that don't serve you. You're already sensing that there's another way to move through the world. A way that doesn't drain you. A way that doesn't leave you feeling like you're constantly auditioning for approval. And that way begins with one simple practice. Pause before you explain. Ask yourself if the explanation serves you or soothes you. If it deepens connection or defends against rejection. And then choose. Consciously. Deliberately. Choose. This is where Jung and Nietzsche and Machiavelli all meet. In the practice of self-mastery. Jung taught us to integrate the shadow. To stop running from the parts of ourselves we've denied. Nietzsche taught us to overcome the herd. To stop living by rules we didn't write. And Machiavelli taught us to conserve power. To stop leaking energy into explanations that weaken instead of strengthen. 3 philosophers. 3 angles. 1 truth. You are not here to make yourself digestible. You're here to become undeniable. Let me give you one last image. Picture a mountain, solid, unmoved by wind or weather or the opinions of those who pass by. The mountain doesn't explain itself. It doesn't justify its height or defend its presence. It simply is, and everyone who encounters it feels its weight. Not because it speaks, but because it doesn't need to. That's the energy you're cultivating. That's the presence you're moving toward. Not cold, not cruel, just solid, unshakable, present. Every time you choose silence over explanation, you're adding to that mountain. Every time you stand in your decision without apology, you're building that presence. And over time, people stop questioning you. Not because you've convinced them, but because you've stopped inviting the conversation. You've stopped signaling that your choices are up for debate. And in that shift, something remarkable happens. You become someone people respect without fully understanding why. They just feel it. The weight, the presence, the quiet authority of someone who knows who they are and doesn't need you to agree. This is not a destination. It's a practice, a daily, moment-by-moment choice to reclaim your energy, to spend your words wisely, to let your actions carry more weight than your explanations. Some days you'll slip, you'll over-explain, you'll justify, you'll fall back into old patterns. That's fine. That's human. The point isn't perfection. The point is direction. Are you moving towards sovereignty or away from it? Are you building presence or leaking power? Are you living like your life needs a defense or like it simply needs a witness? Machiavelli's legacy has been distorted for centuries. People remember the cruelty and forget the clarity. They remember the manipulation and miss the wisdom. But here's what he actually gave us. Permission. Permission to stop performing. Permission to conserve our energy. Permission to recognize that not everyone deserves access to our inner world. And that's not selfishness. That's stewardship. That's taking care of the one life you've been given and refusing to spend it on explanations that don't serve you. So here's my invitation. If this resonates, if you feel that pull towards something deeper, more intentional, more sovereign, then stay. Subscribe, because this is just the beginning. We'll explore more ideas from Jung, from Nietzsche, from Machiavelli and the thinkers who understood that true power is internal. That real change happens in the quiet. That the most important conversations are the ones you have with yourself. And maybe, just maybe, we'll learn together how to live with less explanation and more embodiment. Less defense and more direction. Less noise and more presence. The world will keep demanding explanations. Let it. You don't have to answer. You just have to know, deep in your bones, that your life is yours. Your choices are yours, and the only permission you need is the permission you give yourself. Stop explaining, start embodying, and watch what happens when you let silence be your strength. Power doesn't explain, it simply is, and now, so do you.